Hey YouTube! I'm in a bit of a weird spot where my last monitor broke that was decent and I'm waiting on a new one to arrive, so the subathon that I'm doing is currently on a bit of a hold, but I'm still able to make content, so let's take an in-depth look at one of my recent monster FCs, Expurgation by Jads. On my top 100 accomplishments YouTube playlist, Expurgation is ranked number 2. That's right under Constellation and 2 spots above Megalodon. It's also marked as a grade 20, only the 4th ever FC of that difficulty rating. If you're unfamiliar with the grade system, it's a community works project that I started a while back to be able to subjectively rank the difficulty of accomplishments based on the general effort those accomplishments require to FC. It's not a system that involves calculations or takes into account notes per minute or anything. It's purely curated based on the opinions of experienced players, who all fact-check each other behind the scenes and such. Charts are graded by thinking, okay, so Apollo 21++ is harder than Patterns 2++, which is currently a grade 12, and grade 13 has stuff like Synth Battle vs. Dead Shadow and Vinner, which are pretty close to Apollo 21++'s difficulty, so we'll mark it as grade 13. Due to my impeccable organization skills and, lack of future-proofing things, every single Google Drive document or spreadsheet about the system is outdated, and I haven't had the chance to go make a new video on the topic in a while. AlexGH set up a Discord bot that's in both the Igloo and Plastic Instrument Central that works as a database tool for the grade system. There's suggestion channels for people to ask the grade system mods to add specific songs to the system, and we're always looking for either extremely experienced casuals or top players to help polish the index. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in doing, join the Discords linked in the description. With that out of the way, what makes Expurgation a grade 20? It's a combination of an extremely back-heavy difficulty curve, with the final solo of the song beginning off a transition that I missed 75% of the times I FC'd up to it, and the entire song being nothing but uncheesable technical chord garbage. The main grade 20 benchmark song is Megalodon, which is almost 20 minutes, and this is where the subjective nature of the grade system really has to be taken into account, because comparing 3-minute skill set specific songs and 20-minute patience gauntlets is practically impossible, but I'll try to explain my reasoning for feeling like they're relative. Consistency over time is a really strange thing to quantify effort from with this game, half because hardly anyone but me grinds for tappy songs longer than 10 minutes, so there's always that "am I jaded?" thought process in the back of my head, and half because it's not necessarily just time that forces your nerves to go haywire on an FC. In my experiences, the strongest nerves that I deal with while playing derives from getting past a part in a song that is extremely hard to get to in the first place. It doesn't matter if it's 90 seconds into the song like with Expurgation, 7 minutes like with Constellation, or 15 like with Triathlon. If I only get to a part every 10 or so runs, FCing past it emulates being on a 30-minute note streak mentally. This feeling is amplified a lot if the misses are directly your fault, which only happens more and more often the more technical and complex a song is. It's also made far worse if the song gives you very little downtime. Megalodon was a pretty friendly grind in the sense that the main parts that you develop nerves after hitting has either long breaks afterwards like with Core Dead, or has relatively simple tapping afterwards like with Artwick's Trial. Unlike Meg, Expurgation is very much a gauntlet where almost every section you hit has a harder one following it. There are no breaks, that means no parts that you can relax on or let your focus slip even a little bit. The slightest mistimed motion and you restart. Let's get to the actual method breakdown of this song because there's a ton of nuance to cover and I don't want this explanation to be way too long. Expurgation has 5 distinct parts: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. The intro bit gets you immediately familiar with this chart's gimmick, that being wacky chord tech with extra hopos, taps, and sometimes strums that not only make it harder to read what you're supposed to play, but at times also change how you have to play the section. For those unfamiliar with Clone Hero's engine, one tap note or hopo following a strum note can be auto-hit as long as the hopo doesn't require you to fret something different than the previous strum note. These, and these are really only there as a style choice to emulate the Friday Night Funkin' versus Tricky Fights gimmick from the same song, and to pepper the chart with notes that you don't have to think about to make the ones that you do less obvious. Unfair Battle itself is nothing to write home about compared to the rest of the chart, but it's a prime shit miss zone. Any amount of frustration or otherwise clouded focus made this wildly inconsistent. Unfair Battle B has this weird yellow hopo following an open note with a yellow-blue chord right after. This is hit by treating the yellow hopo as a part of the following chord. This prevents needing to change strumming orientation and requires the least thought, but it is a pretty precise strum timing thing, due to Clone Hero's hammer-on strum leniency window being pretty big. In casual terms, a hammer-on has a short window where it can accept a strum input even after being hit, and if that happens, you miss the next note, which needs that strum input that just got yoinked by the hopo. I like to call this Hungry Hungry Hopos, and while the issue isn't exclusive to Clone Hero, the leniency window is larger than Guitar Hero 3 and Yarg, so it's certainly something to take into account, especially with a grind like this that has fret timing tech like this thrown around like candy out of piñata. This part looks uniquely horrible, but due to extended sustain logic, all I had to do was fret the triple chords and strum on time. The very final triple chord has a hopo before it strums, so you have to fret a little bit earlier than your second to last strum input, but that's not so hard since you know it's there. Hellclown Trade-Off is next, which suffered the most during this grind from constant misses that made me go back and practice and change my method very slightly, only to get it perfectly consistent in practice and miss it over and over again on full runs. That's why I alt-strummed these 3 hopos while holding green and relied on rapid slide chording here despite a different method being quote-unquote obvious. Next is the hardest section from the first half of the song, Direct Assault, and I'm drawing blanks here on how to describe what makes this difficult. I believe the pattern structure and strum speed kinda speak for itself. Unreasonable Battle is next and starts the full sprint to the end of the chart. This is a full solo followed by 16 NPS stamina strumming, followed by a much harder full solo. It's where the runs really got serious, which is terrifying for not even being halfway through the song yet. Like with Direct Assault, the difficulty seems pretty obvious aside from 3 problem spots that are uniquely evil. The first one is Unreasonable A, which requires back and forth in between frets at a pace that's too quick to reasonably get consistent using an all down strums accent method. If that sounds like mumbo jumbo to you, I'm working on a new Dictionary Hero video that should clear up confusion with certain community lingo. Subscribe and stay tuned for that. The strat that I had to work on was trying to space out my strum inputs as much as possible to allow room for my fretting hand to get where it needs to, but even then, this was the least consistent section of the solo. Next up is Unreasonable C, which if you look at the motion I'm using to hit, just seems like chord sliding back and forth between high and low accent chords with hopos between to guide the method, but some of the lower accented chords have green hopos following them instead of red, which requires you to unpress red right after the chord, and not too fast so that you get ahead of yourself on the lead up to the high chords. That in combination with the bursty, while flowy style of this is a real finger twister, and extremely frustrating to miss this late, right before the stamina check section. Take that last sentence and multiply it by 7 for Unreasonable D, which when fully alt-strummed and focused on still suffered from shit misses due to this stupidly awkward chord sequence. And here's that stamina check I was talking about earlier. All the hopos and taps between the strums are auto-hit, so that point boost from saving star power till here is really juicy. And now, Brutal Build followed by Improbability Drive, also known as the chart equivalent of putting a sunflower seed under your toenail and kicking a wall. These I Love Horses style chords right after the triple chord strums is like worst case scenario transition while not involving tapping. This exact note here ended like 140 FCs at least, just bonkers how much I sucked at this. Brutal Build B was one of those fret and strum as fast and accurately as you can and hope that you've got enough energy left, otherwise kiss the run goodbye sections. You'll also notice that for the big end burst I sorta lean to the side and forward. Like with the Solus 2 grind, for some reason I just do certain chords better at this sitting position. That sitting position though really messes with my strum speed and control, so I have to bounce back to normal pretty quickly following that sequence. The full Improbability Drive solo drops a lot of the hopo misdirection difficulty in favor of just being brutally difficult with a ton of timing manipulation for strum bursts and chord sliding. Improbability A immediately gets down to just horrible looking chords. If you've watched any technical chord grind before, you'll know how unforgiving the timing of stuff like this is. The quick single strum burst here with hopos between is like my strum control bread and butter, but the slowdown afterwards with the ridiculous chords afterwards were a real doozy to grind consistency for. If I had to choose just one section to name as the hardest in the chart, it's probably Improbability Drive B. The first half is tough, but relatively not as bad compared to the bit that follows. These chords specifically killed 7 runs before I had a run get past here. Just something about the lead-in to the slide chords and the transition off of it going directly into chords that I kinda just have to do a jank motion for and hope Clone Hero accepts it made this a real run killer. Improbability C is definitely the easiest of the 4 sections at the end, but it's still tougher on its own than Direct Assault just from speed and chord changes alone. And finally, we've got the last hard part, which thankfully I only choked on once before the Improbability Drive D. It starts with normal strum control stuff before some bursty 4-set strums that lead into this blob thing, which I'm just gonna slow down a ton so you can see the fretting motion here. It's rude. The ending of the blob requires you to do these 5 chords, which my method for was pretty much just do 2 ascending quads with your middle ring and pinky and hope CH registers the chords, because any other method just straight up didn't work. Finally, there's another scary chord sequence and a final super fast burst of 7 single strums to end off the solo. The relief of hitting this after having grinded this for over 200 hours over the past year and a half was rewarding as hell. I'm ridiculously proud of this accomplishment, and I hope this breakdown paints a good picture as to why. Hope you enjoyed the video. Have a day.